Hi everyone, it's John Bradbury here, and in this video I'm going to talk about the world of the frontline leader. We're going to explore what that world is like, what it's like to be a frontline leader. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I spent a number of years as a frontline leader and then a number of years managing frontline leaders after that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my story, and then I'm going to look at an overview of the world of the frontline leader. And then we're going to cover these three important areas. The importance of high-performance relationships for a frontline leader, their mindset and why that's important, and working with your team to deliver results. And then I'm going to finish off with three scenarios that compromise performance and describe what they are. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and then go into this overview of the world of the frontline leader. So here's my story. So I spent before I started my own business, I worked in manufacturing for about 20 years. And the first 8 years I spent as a frontline leader, managing around 50 people in most of those roles. And this was in food production. I worked in some challenging environments in Merseyside and in Scotland, where industrial relations were not great and there was a fair bit of conflict. So it took a bit of skill to navigate through that as a frontline leader, but being on the front line all the time and having to deal with unhappy employees, and it was generally pretty challenging. And in my role in Scotland, I was managing 2 production lines with 50 employees. And then in that same factory, it was a pretty big factory with 1,000 people. I was promoted into night shift as the night shift manager, and I worked 5 years of permanent night shift, managing 250 people, and that included 6 team leaders that I had on the shift. So that was a very enjoyable role, actually, working night shift, and I really enjoyed working with that team. And then I came over to Australia in 1997 and was a manufacturing manager in the food industry for 7 years. And then I decided that I wanted to go on my own and start my own business. And this is in 2004. And I started my own business. Basically, I was working on coaching, leadership coaching, team development work, and teaching people how to collaborate. And so and I decided I needed to get some qualification in coaching, so I did an international accreditation. And then since 2004, I've been coaching frontline leaders and managers in manufacturing and supply chain. And I'd say I learned a tremendous amount from the people who I managed when I was in manufacturing. I was both in frontline leader and then in the later roles that I did, more senior roles I had. You learn so much from the people that you're working with, and they tell you when your leadership's not so good, and if you're listening to what they're saying, then you start to change and adjust your style and your leadership to meet the needs of the team. And so I learned an awful lot from the people that I worked with. And I also had some great mentors along the way, some senior managers who influenced me and taught me a lot. So that's a little bit on my story. So let's look at the overview of the world of the frontline leader. And so why is it so challenging to be a frontline leader? Well, if you look at this diagram, the frontline leader has to manage all these relationships. So, a 360-degree view of the world of the frontline leader, they have to build a working relationship with their manager or supervisor. They have to engage a team of people to deliver some outcomes, and then they also have to collaborate with their peers and with other departments in order to get things done. So when you look at that scenario, the interpersonal skills that are required by a frontline leader are pretty high. It's a high level of skill requirement because all those people that they're interacting with, the frontline leader probably interacts with more people than anyone else in an organization on a day-to-day basis. So that's why it's worthwhile supporting frontline leaders to develop because of the impact that they have on the business. They have a really big impact on the business. And what I've learned over the years working as a frontline leader and then managing frontline leaders is that this relationship is extremely important. The one with their supervisor or manager is a very important relationship. And I've written high performance relationship there because that's what it needs to be. It needs to be a very strong relationship based on trust, because if that relationship's not working, then the rest falls apart basically. So not only do they need to build a strong relationship with their manager and supervisor, they have to manage all these other relationships as well. So there are three key areas, I think, for a frontline leader's development. The first is this relationship with the supervisor or manager. The second is their own mindset and their own motivation and engagement. Because if a frontline leader isn't motivated and engaged, that's going to impact a lot of people around them. Not in a good way if they're demotivated. And then the third thing that's really important is their skills and their ability to motivate and engage a team of people to deliver business results. So there's sort of three separate areas there that all come together to create a high-performing frontline leader, and those are the areas that we're going to be focusing on in this program. So the importance of that high-performance relationship. What is a high-performance relationship? Well, I'm looking now specifically between the supervisor and the frontline leader. And here's some features of the relationship when it's high performance. And the first is that both the supervisor and frontline leader feel heard and understood by each other. So that takes a bit of effort, and that takes, in order for that to occur, they need to be making time for each other, basically, and making time to listen to each other and speak openly, which is why this program has those high quality alignment discussions scheduled after each module, because I want to make sure that this relationship is a strong one. And they'll speak directly with each other without fear of damaging the relationship. So there's a level of trust where the frontline leader and the supervisor can be very open with each other without creating lasting damage. And they carve out time to communicate with each other regularly, one-on-one, and that makes sure that they stay aligned on direction. And that's the next point, actually. They both want the same result, and they're aligned on priorities. That's a sign that it's a high-performance relationship. The frontline leader believes that my supervisor supports me. So if they have that belief, then clearly there's been some work done on the relationship for that to be the case. And the supervisor will challenge the frontline leader to develop and grow. So it's not a sort of relax and let's be mates type of relationship, although that can still be true, but it's more about getting the job done and developing in the job. And there needs to be trust in this relationship for it to be high performance and for all those things that are listed above to be true. So this has a crucial impact on performance. So you can imagine, and maybe some of you have experienced, if there isn't a high performance relationship in existence, then all sorts of things can go wrong, and that will negatively impact the frontline leader and his or her ability to deliver results. And in my experience, if there is no high performing relationship between the supervisor and frontline leader, there's no high performing frontline leader or team. But you don't get a poor relationship between the supervisor and the frontline leader and then a miraculously high-performing frontline leader and team. That doesn't seem to be the case. I haven't come across that yet. And this is the reason why this program has a focus on building a high-performance relationship between the supervisor and the frontline leader. Now, some of you may already have that, and some of you may not, but this program is designed to build on wherever you are now, to build on that and to make the relationship you have with each other a stronger one, and one that delivers really good results for your business. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of mindset. And So why is mindset input? Why is it important in the first place? Well, if you have to think about what you're role modeling, what are you communicating with your team all the time? If you're in a role of a frontline leader, then you're interacting with a lot of people, and if your mindset isn't motivated and engaged, you are communicating that whether you like it or not. So if you have a demotivated, disengaged mindset, everyone will know that. They'll just pick it up, and you can try and hide it, but you won't be able to, because people are pretty smart. They'll pick that up. So, that second point that I'm making there on this slide, the invisible line in your team member's job description is "Watch my leader." So everyone's watching you. So when you're in this role of leadership, it's almost like being on a stage, and that's why it's worthwhile working on your own mindset. So if you don't have, if you're not highly motivated and highly engaged and role modeling those behaviors, then start to think why that's the case, what's missing for you at the moment, and understand that that's going to have an impact on your team. So what can you do to lift your level of motivation? Do you know why you're not motivated? If you're not motivated, why is that? And how could you go to another level of motivation? What's getting in the way of you being highly motivated? These are really good questions to consider, because some of this might be within your power to fix, and you might need support to fix that. It might be something to do with your environment that you feel is outside your control, but you can talk to your supervisor about it. But we want to create the right environment for you as a frontline leader to be highly motivated, and therefore for your team to be the same. So anything we can do to fix that environment, we should be looking at. So now I'm going to talk a bit about working with your team to deliver results. So let's think about the goals for a minute. These are so important when it comes to motivating a team. And I just want to ask you that question. Are you and your team clear on what your goals are? Because that's really important if you want to engage your team. And if not, then this is something that we will be discussing in the first discussion with your supervisor after this module. We're going to be focusing on goals and how well they've been set and how clear they are. But motivation does come from having achievable goals that are out of reach at the moment, but if we believe we can get there, then that's what motivates people. And you need some feedback against those goals so that the team can be involved. So think for a minute now, does your team know what the goal is, and do they get regular feedback, and how often do they see that feedback? And how could you improve that? Because if you want to engage a team, you really need to be showing them what the goal is, and then showing them that feedback as regular as possible, so that they know exactly where they stand. So, are you engaged with the goals yourself that you've set for your team? And if you're not, why not? They might be too easy, maybe, or maybe they're too difficult. But we need to get to a situation where you, as the frontline leader, feel highly engaged with those goals, and that you have a high level of motivation. So we want to be stretching you and the team, but not to the point where you're going, this is ridiculous, we're never going to hit that goal. But if you think you can make that difference, and that you can help the team deliver on a goal that stretches you all, then that's the perfect position to be in, because that's what really motivates people. And the other thing is, what number of goals do you have? Because if you're trying to fix 10 goals at the same time, then that just isn't going to happen. You really want to have one overall big goal that you're aiming at, if that's possible in your business. That's the ideal scenario. If you can get 2 maximum goals, then that's the way to, that's much more likely to engage people, because they can focus on that one thing all the time rather than having to think about 10 things, and hop from one to the other. So this diagram explains it. If you think about your energy and the team's energy. And on the left hand side, we've got all these goals that we're aiming to achieve, and we've just got a little bit of energy for each goal, and we just maybe make a little bit of progress on each goal from time to time. But on the right hand side, you've got one main goal you're aiming at, and everyone's channeling their energy into that one goal, and it's very visible, and we understand how we're going all the time. Then you're going to make a lot more progress on that one goal. Now, I understand that it's not always that simple in businesses that are supply chain and manufacturing, which is the sort of businesses I work with. It's not always that simple, but it can be simplified from where I often find it. I often find that there's far too many goals set, and it's too complex. So have a think about that. Can you get to a situation where those goals are simple, easy to understand, visible, with a lot of feedback happening regularly? And what goal are you prepared to commit to? So if we can get to a situation where there's only one or two main goals that you're aiming at, then what would be a good stretch goal to commit to? Maybe you already have one. Maybe you're already committed to a stretch goal, and it's motivating you and engaging you. But if that's not the case, then I think we need to think about that and make sure that we've got that organised and got the goals set. So this is this is a well-known description of goals that are a useful way of looking at goals, SMART goals. So we want our goals to be specific, well-defined, clear, and unambiguous, and they need to be measurable. So you want to be able to get feedback, and preferably hourly against a goal if that's possible, or continuous feedback's even better. But this isn't always possible. But you want specific criteria that measure your progress towards the goal, so you know where you are, and you've got a number to look at. And you want the goal to be something that everyone believes is possible, but it's not easy. So it's something that you're going to have to work for to get there. That's what motivates people. That's what gets them engaged. They're not there yet, but they believe they can get there. And you want a good timeline as well. So what I found in manufacturing was having hourly goals was a really good, clearly defined timeline, because if we were working an 8-hour shift and we had a bad 2 hours at the beginning of the shift, then because you've got an hourly goal, you can reset for the 3rd hour and the 4th hour. You can always reset your target and start again, and it's not like you give up after the 1st hour because you had a bad 1st hour. You can reset every hour. So that's why it's ideal to break them down into smaller chunks like that. So agreeing performance goals with your supervisor. So I just want to talk a little bit about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So this statement is true. People are most motivated and least stressed when they have a goal they're focused on achieving, and they believe they can make the goal, but they aren't yet there. And so we want to create a situation where that is true. And the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is, so extrinsic motivation is when somebody else is pushing you to be engaged and motivated. So it's like if they weren't there, you wouldn't be motivated. And that's not ideal. What we're looking for is intrinsic motivation, where people are driven from within. So the motivation comes from within you as an individual. And you can probably look at your team, and you can maybe see people on the team, some of whom are intrinsically motivated, and they're always on the go, and they're always trying to do things. They don't like relaxing, they're busy, they're always looking for something else to do, and they're really engaged with delivering results. And then you may, at the other end of the spectrum, you might find people who are not so motivated, and they're not as engaged, and it's quite obvious which people are and which people aren't. But what's required for intrinsic motivation is these three things that I've listed here. First of all, competence. So this is a belief that I'm competent and capable of achieving this goal. So that's a question worth asking yourself as a frontline leader. Do you feel competent and capable of leading your team to achieve the goals that they're chasing? Because that's the first part of being intrinsically motivated. Imagine if you don't feel competent achieving a goal, then there's something missing for you in your skills, maybe, or maybe you just, the job looks too difficult. So it's hard for you to be intrinsically motivated if you don't feel like you're competent. So that's worth thinking about. Do you feel that you're competent, and if not, what needs to be done to get you to a place where you do feel competent as a frontline leader? The second thing is autonomy. So are you being allowed to lead and not being micromanaged? Because if you're being micromanaged and you can't do anything without someone looking over your shoulder, that will not result in intrinsic motivation. That's a situation that results in extrinsic motivation, and then you're not going to be, it's like what will you be doing when the person's not looking over your shoulder? It's the wrong setup. You need to be allowed to lead as a frontline leader. And so if this is the case, then what needs to happen for you to feel like you do have autonomy? And this is something that I will put on the agenda for discussion with your supervisor at the first meeting that you have, the first high quality alignment discussion you have. This will be on the agenda. And the third thing, as I've already mentioned, is performance feedback. So you need regular, clear, visible performance feedback so that you know where you are against your goal. There's no point in having a goal and then not knowing how you're going. You can't get motivated if you have no idea how you're going against that goal. So these three things are really important for intrinsic motivation, and we want to set up ourselves and our team members to be intrinsically motivated as much as we can. So the same applies to team members. Do they believe they're competent? And if not, we need to help them so that they do get to a place where they feel that they're competent. And are they allowed to lead themselves? Have they got the right level of responsibility in their job, or are you managing them? Are you micromanaging them at all? Have a think about that. And is that performance feedback regular, clear, and visible for your team members? So, as I said before, we'll touch more on this at the first high quality alignment discussion. So now I'm just going to close with 3 scenarios that compromise performance, and these are related to what we've already been discussing in this training. And the first scenario is what I call disconnected, and this is where the relationship between the supervisor and a frontline leader is not a high performance relationship. So if you're not working together closely and there isn't a lot of trust, then I call this disconnected, because that's exactly what it is. The frontline leader is going to feel disconnected from the supervisor and from the organization. And this can still be a problem, even if the frontline leader's mindset is good and the goals are clearly set. You can still have a problem if that relationship with the supervisor is not high performance. So if this is the situation, we want to be upfront and open about this and get to work on this relationship so that we're not disconnected and we fix that disconnection. The second scenario is where the frontline leader is demotivated and disengaged, and I call this demotivated for that reason. And so you need, I think, for this scenario, the thing to do is to think as a frontline leader: are you motivated? Are you engaged? And if not, why not? And that needs to be discussed with your supervisor if that's a problem. And because we want to fix that. I mean, part of this program is fixing demotivation. And so if you are demotivated, we want to talk about that, get that out in the open, and start to work on that and put some plans in place to make sure that you can become motivated and engaged, because that's so important for the people around you and for your team. If you're not motivated and engaged, then they won't be, because that's the role model they're getting. And the third scenario is when the goals are not clearly set. So we can have a good relationship between the frontline leader and the supervisor, and the frontline leader can be highly engaged and motivated. But if those goals are not clearly set, then we get chaos, and that's why I was talking about not having too many goals, because if you've got 10 goals you're chasing after, that can be a bit chaotic. It's like, well, what are we doing today? And people don't always understand what the priority is. So that's why I think it's important to look at the goals and how many you've got and see if you can simplify that. And here's what we're really looking for, is a high performance environment where the relationship between the supervisor and the frontline leader is high performance. The frontline leader has a highly motivated and engaged mindset, and goals have been clearly set. And if we've got all three of those, if we've got 3 ticks there, we're starting to really make progress, and this is how we get really great results in an organization. But it takes a lot of work and commitment to get those 3 ticks, and that's what this program is about, making sure that we've got a tick on each of these items. So the action items coming out of this video, this training, are to meet with your supervisor for your first high quality alignment discussion. And there's an agenda for this meeting in the resources section. There's also a cheat sheet in the resources section on how to conduct a high quality alignment discussion, because that's important. You need to set the scene to make sure that you've got the right environment. These are important guidelines. There's also a coaching practice for you, the frontline leader, in the resources section, and this is something to engage with after you've had your high quality alignment discussion. But you can read it before that, obviously, but I think having the discussion first and then getting onto that coaching practice, which is related to goals, is the way to go. And then these weekly Q&A calls that are going to occur. If you've got any questions, you can post those in the private Facebook group, and they'll get answered in the group, or you can come along to the weekly Q&A call and ask the question directly, and I'll answer it for you on the call. And then make sure you obtain a journal. So I want you to make notes from your high quality alignment discussion. Make notes after that meeting, and also use the journal to make notes from your coaching practice, because the coaching practice will ask you a lot of questions to consider, and I want you to write the answers to those questions in the journal so that you start sort of embedding the learning. And then those notes will be used in the next high quality alignment discussion with your supervisor. So that's the way this program will work, as I showed with the structure earlier. So look, thank you for attending this session, and I just want to say one last thing, which is, have you made a commitment yet to your own development? Because it's my firm belief that leadership can be learned. It's not something that you're born with necessarily. In fact, I don't think you're born with it. I think it's something that you can learn, and that's why I'm committed to this program of development, because I believe as frontline leaders you can learn to be better leaders, and you can learn leadership. So please make that commitment, and I'll see you in the next video.